pursuing knowledge for the purpose of pursuing knowledge has a lot of value in it itself. There's a quote from Mark Twain where he says, "Don't let school get in the way of your education." School is a great place. I mean, that's where you are exposed to all of these ideas. But it's what you do as a student and those tangents that you can follow to learn more about those ideas yourself. A grade is just a symbol. This traditional, if you will, ABC system can be beneficial. It's not always beneficial.
How can someone shift their mindset and focus more on the learning aspect?
It all begins with your self-talk. A lot of people will do one of two things. They will hate their teachers. The second thing that people will do is put their teachers on pedestals. I would see like all these abbreviations after someone's name, MD, PhD, FACP, MBA, and I'd be like, whoa. So Stanford, it is one of the most collaborative institutions. I walked into this engineering lab and I was like, yo, how's it going? And they welcomed me into that engineering lab despite me being from the School of Medicine. And I was surrounded by this group of students who are incredibly intelligent, but not just academically, they're talented in so many different spheres of life. Being surrounded in that environment where people are just pushing themselves voluntarily, just out of genuine interest and love for what they do, that was one of the best parts for me. All right, my name is Raza Ali. I'm a student, but really I am just trying to be a good person. I think a lot of the things that I've done fall in a lot of different baskets, but at the end of the day, it's just me trying to improve myself in any sense of the word.
That's really awesome. Sick. Welcome to our first episode of season 3.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
When you were growing up, what led you to what you are today? Like, what was that one point that really kind of changed you?
I was actually born in Omaha, Nebraska, the middle of nowhere. It's literally just plain land with corn and steaks that are not halal. So we were literally, my mom was actually doing her master's there at UNO, Go Corn Huskers. That's their mascot, Corn Huskers. So you can imagine that the agricultural life was really chill in every sense of the word. I don't remember much from Omaha because we left there and moved here to California when I was just 2. We came to the South Bay originally, Sunnyvale, and then shortly after to Cupertino. So I would say Cupertino is where I spent those really important first 5 developmental years. So I did like preschool and kindergarten in Cupertino, which is an interesting environment because right around that same time, Apple was really reaching a new stage of development. And I remember when Steve Jobs passed away, there were like people who would take apples, take a bite out of it and put it on the streets. And they were just lining the streets of Cupertino. I was there as a little kid. I was like, what's going on? Why is everyone eating all these apples and just letting them rot on the streets? But yeah, my childhood, so then we moved to San Ramon, which is where I've been since. That was 12 years ago. So most of my childhood really has been in San Ramon, going to San Ramon schools, the public school system, which we'll definitely talk about later. My childhood, I would say, has been pretty regular. I've been blessed to have really good mentors and teachers who I'm really appreciative of. But nothing out of the ordinary, to be honest.
The Apple thing was really interesting, actually, because I recently moved to the Bay Area around like 4 years ago or something, and I didn't know much about Apple other than the fact that I had a MacBook.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize actually that there was that much dedication in the city, in the state, and everything like that to Steve Jobs and everything.
Tech culture, I think, is really important in the Bay Area. But in some ways, that's kind of what got me away from tech culture. Like, the reason why I'm not studying computer science, at least not yet, we'll see what the future holds, but is in some ways like a counterculture or rebellion thing that all of my friends in San Ramon were going to CS or data science or applied math for the purposes of comp sci. I think just being brought up in the Silicon Valley and the surrounding areas was an interesting point in my life, because I did start off with a more CS focused background. I wouldn't even say background. I took like one class in it. Actually, right here at Sabah, they had a workshop by Shine Labs. Shout out to them. Actually, they're doing a lot of really great work. But Shine Labs organized an Arduino workshop for kids my age. I think I was probably in early middle school, maybe the tail end of elementary school. And I took this workshop in computer science. My project was to design a weather station. So we got an Arduino, we put a bunch of different sensors on it, like a temperature sensor, pressure sensor, humidity sensor. And as I was translating that into code, I was so lost. Like the whole way through, I had my buddy who was like basically doing everything for me, or we were grabbing everything from the internet. I wasn't learning anything really. And maybe I should learn how to program. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this unfolds in the future. Just to see how computer science and technology is going to infiltrate, if you will, every industry.
And AI.
And AI. Yeah, ChatGPT.
We had to bring AI into it.
Yeah. But that workshop and actually the after experience of that sort of geared me away from technology. Or not technology, but a CS route for the future.
Gotcha. And that's what pushed you into the med field, huh?
Yeah, there's only two options. No, there's definitely more than two options, but I started taking classes that were more geared towards biomedical sciences. And our school, the lovely thing about San Ramon schools, and more schools are actually adopting this, they have CTE classes.
Career technical education, right?
Exactly, career and technical education. And when I was coming out of my freshman year of high school, and I wanted to see, okay, which CTE classes should I take? I didn't really have too much guidance at that point. That was just when COVID was at like its full peak and lockdowns were prevalent here in the Bay Area. So I didn't have like a guidance counselor whose door I could knock and just go into their office. I had to sort of figure it out by myself. Maybe my sister definitely, she definitely had something to do with it, because she took those biomedical science classes and she was like, hey, these are actually kind of cool, so why don't you try them out? Have to give her some credit for sure.
There you go.
Otherwise, I'm not going to get home safe.
So we talked about childhood. Now, what about the part of your childhood that made you who you are today? That, we all have that one moment which kind of, maybe it's not one moment, maybe it's a collection of a whole bunch of moments, but is there one specific thing that you remember that kind of sparked something in your mind that kind of changed things and kind of led you to like really realize who you are and like make you what you are today? Even though we're all still growing and everything, obviously.
Absolutely. I think there's multiple different moments that have not even defined my life, but defined a single aspect of my life, if you will. For education, there was a specific moment that I vividly remember. I was actually in this biomedical science class that I'm describing to you. The full title of the class is Honors Principles of Biomedical Sciences, PBS. And PBS is an introductory class to everything related to medicine, human biology, physiology. It's like a crash course, very simplified, of what is human health and what is human biology. And my teacher for this class, her name is Joanna Condon. And Miss Condon, this one time, we had this assignment that the class didn't do so well in. I think there was some sort of like academic integrity breaches happening, and people were, I don't know, like collaborating when they shouldn't have been, which we can talk about, but there was some like cheating going on. And when we were debriefing the assignment the day it was due, she sort of took note of this. Teachers know when you're cheating, by the way, most of the time. And
I mean, with ChatGPT, Well, we can see. We'll see.
You can tell. You can
Yeah.
easily
Most
tell
of the
if
time.
something
Yeah,
is
no, they
written
can
by
tell. They
AI.
can
Most
tell.
of the
Like
time.
even like for me, I'll tell you an example.
Mhm.
Like it's like so I'm in college now, and then I have an English class, and she was saying like the Chat GPT stuff, you can tell it's dry, it doesn't have that tone. Even when you start running it through, telling it to write like, write like a student, write like someone
Yeah.
who has bad grammar.
That's never the right way. I can give
never
away
the right way.
I can give away the hacks, but I'm not gonna.
Yeah.
I think the thing is now it's a lot harder because then you can just have it like do most of the work for you, but then you do the rest of the work, and then it's still. But then there's the argument that is still your work and everything, and it's not cheating. So
Yeah, what
it's a really risky.
What are your
line.
thoughts on that?
Yeah,
That's
actually,
a good point
what
you
is-
brought up. Like you
what
can
is your
use
thoughts on
AI
that?
to aid in your work. However, isn't that technically cheating? What's your thoughts on that?
Sure. So actually, yesterday I met an English professor at Stanford who was talking about her students using AI and what their school sort of perspective is on this. Because obviously that institution, they're very early adopters of technology, and they don't want to minimize that. But at the same time, really, we're talking about writing, so I'll talk specifically on that. Writing is condensed thinking. It's distilled thinking. So for you to be having all these random thoughts and to piece them together, that is the writing process. And I say the writing process intentionally because it's very iterative. You have to go through many stages to go from an outline, or even before an outline, an idea, and translate that into a polished work, which in many ways is still unfinished, but something that you can submit. And this professor's take on it was AI is not a human, and so it doesn't have the ability to write like a human would. It scrapes all this data.
It mimics a human.
It mimics a human, but it's not the same as a human. Like you mentioned, with tone and mood, and even something as simple as contractions and the natural way that we speak, it's not yet there. Will it be? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think eventually it'll be able to mimic it so well that it's like you wouldn't be able to tell that it's mimicking. But you're right that at the end of the day, it is not human. So I mean, it will never be human. But yeah.
But is this the way to go?
No, I don't think so, because humans are best when they're thinking. So it doesn't serve you as a student to be using ChatGPT or any other sort of AI mechanism of getting out of that thinking. Because at the end of the day, when you're in an education system, the goal, although sometimes that goal doesn't always go as planned, but is to have you think, to expand the confines of your brain. In that same vein, back to what we were talking about with Miss Condon.
My bad for interrupting.
No,
you,
it's all
but-
good. The tangents are really important. That's real thought. She stares straight at us and she goes, "I don't care about your grades. I care about your learning." And that moment was really valuable for me personally, to shift from this mindset of A's, B's, and C's to genuine learning. There's a quote from Mark Twain where he says, "Don't let school get in the way of your education."
That's really good.
That's deep.
That is really
That's
good.
deep.
Yeah. And school is a great place. I mean, that's where you are exposed to all of these ideas. But it's what you do as a student with that exposure, where you take that, and those tangents that you can follow to learn more about those ideas yourself. So I think the point that Ms. Condon was trying to make is that a grade is just a symbol, right? That's not to get rid of the importance of grades as an assessment of learning, because at the end of the day, that's all it is. A grade shows, do you know this material at the time of a test or a homework assignment? It's meant to check in and say, how can we quantify, how can we make this learning, which is such an abstract concept, into something that's more measurable?
Right on.
And there are other ways to do that, including standards-based grading. But this traditional, if you will, ABC system can be beneficial. It's not always beneficial. And so Ms. Condon's point was, she drew like this random symbol, it was like a swirl or something on the whiteboard, and she says, if I give each one of you these, it doesn't mean anything. It's the value that you assign to that symbol, and the value that's assigned to grades is that of learning. So if you've learned the material, you actually know it, and if you actually know it, then you can prove it on an assessment. And there's a lot of other factors to be considered, like test anxiety. Some people don't perform as well on specific types of tests as others. This is sort of one of my many passion projects, is sort of learning a little bit more about education and what it means to actually learn from both a neurology perspective, but also a system perspective. I need to dive deeper into that.
For sure.
And that's one of the things that I'm really interested about.
Yeah, so what you just brought up right now is actually one of my biggest issues with the schooling system in general as a 12th grader. I mean, it's just something that I've been thinking about for a long time, is like the same concept of like, okay, you have all these things, but at the end of the day, school is more, at least what it is now, what it's become is all about failing or passing or getting good grades, or like this thing that you do, this class that you take determines the rest of your life. It's rarely about learning. Like, to all the teachers out there, it should be about learning. Like, isn't that what education is supposed to be? Like definitely grades are important, but like a lot of times it's become that grades are above everything else and learning has taken the backstage, is what I'm seeing, unfortunately.
I think that's a lot of that comes down to your perspective as a student. Because at the end of the day, school is still a center for learning.
That's true.
And it's the way that you interpret the material that you're given as a student. We talked about my tutoring. Sometimes I'll have students come to me and they're like, why do I even need to learn this? Right? And sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's not going to be relevant to your future career, but knowledge for the pursuit of knowledge, or I should say pursuing knowledge for the purpose of pursuing knowledge, has a lot of value in it itself. It might not ever be useful, but it's still a good way to push the boundaries of your brain. With limits, obviously. You do want to be practical and not just dive too deep into like highly theoretical topics that have no real applications. But there's a balance that you can draw, and sometimes it's important to just learn something that's not important. At least in my books.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I like how you mentioned that, the pursuit of knowledge for the purpose of pursuing knowledge. That's really deep. But I wanted to touch on backtracking a little bit on your Stanford, right? You mentioned you were talking to people at Stanford, and you also have an internship that you did at Stanford, right? So if you could tell everyone about that and how that went.
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. It was, I think, March of this year. March 7th was the application deadline, and I found out about this on like March 5th. So I had 2 days. I was just Googling like things to do in the summer because I knew that I'd be finishing up high school, so I wanted to do something that would be like academically stimulating during the summer. And I found this program called the Stanford Anesthesia Summer Institute. Frankly, it's an expensive program, so I had to think about that a little bit, but it was definitely well worth the money. Although Stanford has like 40 or 50 other programs for high school and undergraduate students, so there's a lot of things that can be explored there. The thing about Stanford specifically that drew me to that program, the whole program is called the Stanford Anesthesia Summer Institute Clinical Science, Technology, and Medicine Summer Internship. It's a mouthful.
Memorize the whole thing.
Yeah. But in the name, it has a lot of meaning. There's the clinical science aspect, there's the technology aspect, and there's the medicine aspect. So Stanford, I think, is maybe the most is a stretch, but it is one of the most collaborative institutions, especially that have reached a certain level of academic strength. I literally, as part of this internship, which was sponsored by the School of Medicine, I walked into this engineering lab, and I was like, yo, how's it going? And they welcomed me into that engineering lab despite me being from the School of Medicine. So being able to collaborate across disciplines is going to be increasingly important in the future, especially as technology gets more advanced and, like I mentioned earlier, infiltrates every industry. Maybe infiltrate isn't the right word. Collaborates with every industry. Pushes forward every industry.
Enhances.
Sure.
Enhance.
Yeah.
I like that.
But the SASI program, Stanford Anesthesia Summer Institute program, was pretty short term. It was only a few weeks, but in those few weeks, I was exposed to so much in medicine, a lot outside of medicine, when it comes to technology, art, humanities. There was so much that was covered in those 2 weeks. There were about 100 other students with me, and the sort of format of the internship is that we would have, I wouldn't even call it an internship as much as like a summer program. They use the word internship because at the end of it you do end up doing some research if you choose, and you it's part of the program to develop a capstone project and something that is functional, so you are creating things, and I think that's why they choose the word internship. But it's more of like a class or a series of classes, and as such it's tuition based, right? Instead of them paying you for doing work as an intern, you pay them to get access to the faculty primarily. That was one of the best parts for me about this internship, being able to have conversations with leaders in medicine, people who are changing the next few decades of a field. That was really impactful for me. But beyond the faculty, the other students that you're surrounded by. When I first walked in, the building is called Li Ka-shing at Stanford. It's on the School of Medicine campus. And I walked into the lecture hall, Li Ka-shing, and I was surrounded by this group of students who are incredibly intelligent, but not just academically. They're talented in so many different spheres of life. I met this one guy who is like a national level fencer. This other guy who just plays soccer, and he's on like the best youth soccer league, like yourself, playing soccer. But being surrounded in that environment where people are just pushing themselves voluntarily, not necessarily to achieve a good grade or get into a prestigious institution, but just out of genuine interest and love for what they do, that was one of the best parts for me. And then along with that is the diversity of location. So there are people there from Kazakhstan, people there from the UK, a lot of different places within the United States, from Texas and Maryland and Brazil. I made good friends with another student from Brazil, and just being able to tap into their perspective. Alongside the faculty, I think I learned just as much from the students and my interactions with them as I did from the esteemed and accomplished lecturers.
Before we dive any deeper, let's talk about ABSA Network, our partner for this season of the podcast. If you've been following Journey Towers, you know we love sharing stories and helping each other succeed. ABSA Network gets that. They've set up cool events, internships, and scholarships for Shia students who dream big and want to make a difference. But it's not just about work and success. ABSA is also there to help us connect spiritually, guided by knowledgeable scholars and professionals. With a community of over 300 students across 60 university chapters, they're spreading Islamic knowledge and bringing the Shia community closer on campuses. Interested? Jump in, stay updated with ABSA on socials, and become part of the global family. You can apply to start an ABSA chapter using the link in the description, or check out their social media pages to stay connected. Let's go together in every way. Thank you to ABSA for partnering with us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Recently in the summer, a few weeks ago, I went to this place called Founders Inc. in San Francisco, and it was like really interesting to see that there's all these young guys, like people even like my age even, and like in their 20s and stuff, all just grinding with the goal of like building out products, founding new things and stuff. And like you really see when you're surrounded by people with a mindset like that, you can go anywhere. It's like it's crazy.
Yeah. And I like how you touched on that mindset, right? So I wanted to ask you, Raza, so when it comes to your learning mindset, the mindset that you develop now when it comes to loving that pursuit of knowledge, like you mentioned, right? how does someone that, let's say, a normal run-of-the-mill student who's just there or he's just going through the system, he's just there to get his grades, how can someone shift their mindset and focus more on the learning aspect? If you could touch on that.
First of all, I think there's no such thing as a normal or run-of-the-mill student. In America specifically, we like to emphasize that everyone is unique, but I think that is very true, despite how it might have been misinterpreted in our parenting systems and whatnot. But that's a whole different discussion. To answer your specific question, how do you change that mindset, right, from grades to learning? It all begins with your self-talk. If you are going through the motions in your classes just because you want to get a good grade or end up somewhere where... Okay, I need to pause and think about that for a second, because that's really interesting. It's not like an instantaneous thing, right? The self-talk is a really important part of it, but more important than that, I would say, is your interactions with your teachers. A lot of people will do one of two things. Number one, they will hate their teachers, and they will take things personally, which I think is a really unnecessarily difficult way of going through education, where you feel like your teacher is singling you out or attacking you with assignments, if you will. I don't think that's really helpful. And a good way to better that is to build a human connection with your teacher. So outside of just the confines of the material, like just ask them, hey, how's it going? You know, sometimes they have something else going on in their life. You have something else going on in your life. And I think that comes down to the teacher as well, like who you can build those relationships with. And that will definitely help you, you know, if you're going on pursuing education for those letters of recommendation or whatever else you might need a good relationship with someone with. If you're in college, maybe a research position. But the second thing that people will do is put their teachers on pedestals and think that they're not approachable or that they're too distant. This is something that I experienced when I was at Stanford, where I would see like all these abbreviations after someone's name, MD, PhD, FACP, MBA, and I'd be like, whoa. You know, this person has done a lot of work. And then to add insult to injury, they would be introduced with all of these accolades and accomplishments and like, I'm honored to welcome to the lecture hall this person who's done all these amazing things. And so that can also be like an issue for approachability. If you think that, oh, I'm just less than this person, or they've done all this amazing stuff, so that makes them like better than me. I don't think that's helpful at all, and it's definitely harmful. So that is one, to switch from grades to learning, build good connections with your teachers. Thing number two, which can be a little bit more difficult, is to make a conscious effort to enjoy the material. Sometimes, especially in public education, we get put in classes that we don't necessarily want to take because they're required by the state, for example, right? Like you need to take these many English classes and these many history, social sciences classes, these many math classes in order to graduate. So if you are telling yourself that, oh, I don't like this or I don't excel at this, and thus it's okay that I don't apply myself fully, that is not going to help you learn. And in some ways, like when I talk about my experience with programming, I've done that as well. Or I'm like, oh, I just don't know how to code. That's it, hands up, right? But you can't just, but you can't give up like that, right? You need to continue to push the boundary of what is learning and how you talk to yourself about the material. Like when you're doing that math homework and you're saying, beyond just teaching me how to find the limit as x approaches 0, this is teaching me how to solve problems, how to organize a complicated system, or I should say organize a complicated issue into an actionable system. That's what I think, beyond the regular arithmetic, math is really helpful for problem solving.
And like seeing the bigger picture, like you mentioned, like.
Yeah. General education, I think, is also really important. This is something that I have had to contend with a little bit. When I was in high school, or specifically, I think in my sophomore year of high school, I was like, okay, why am I having to take all of these random social science classes that have nothing to do with my intended major? Yeah, right. But then I realized, and I think I was attending a talk at CSU East Bay. And there was a professor there. Actually, he wasn't a professor. He was a physician. He was a neurologist. And I was talking to him about general education. And he says, enjoy it. Because this is the only time in your life that you can take all of these classes to expand your mind. And instead of getting specifically siloed or just hyper-focused on a specific topic that you'll probably end up doing when you get later down the academic route, enjoy being able to take random classes. So after that talk, I enrolled at community college to start getting my general education classes sort of knocked out. That was my mentality back then. Just get them out of the way so I can focus on the STEM stuff, the stuff that I'm actually interested in as a pre-medical student, inshallah. So back then I was like, okay, I'm just going to get psych out of the way, get sociology out of the way, get history just done. But as I took those classes, I was like, oh, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, interesting, right?
Yeah, and then you can see how this intersects with the topics that you're genuinely more interested in learning about. And as I was going through these classes, instead of thinking, oh, I just need to get this out of the way, I was like, why don't I actually immerse myself in U.S. history or immerse myself in psych or sociology? And that was really helpful for me, because I wasn't just going through the motions. I was like actually enjoying the classes I was taking, albeit for a shorter period of time, just for a semester. One of the benefits of doing all those dual enrollment classes is I was able to take more of them. So with AP classes, for example, you have to take a full year of that class, and you're sort of stuck with it, if you will, for that entire academic year. The semester format at Las Positas allowed me to take a variety of different things within a short period of time.
There's a mindset that people have, even I've had it personally, it's speaking from personal experience, that learning is limited. Your brain is limited to how much knowledge you can devour. It's just like this thing. I think what it comes from is, in the past, it used to be the case. I heard someone talking about this. This is a really interesting point, that education and knowledge used to be really valuable. You had to travel to you had to travel across the world to find a certain book that you needed. You had to go to libraries, search through books and everything. Now education is education isn't a currency anymore in that sense. It's available everywhere. You can go to chatgpt.com and learn any skill that you want. And I've actually done this over the summer. I spent around a month every single day just learning a new thing, whether it's psychology, introduction to psychology, introduction to mixing and mastering, all these things. Obviously, you're not going to go deep into things with ChatGPT. You have to take the real course and everything, but at least you can be introduced to the basics of everything. So I think it's that mindset of now education is everywhere, so there is no limit to how much education you can do. Yeah.
Education is everywhere, but in some ways it can be overstimulating.
That's true.
When you have access to literally trillions of websites that you can go to and things that you can learn. This was actually a topic that we discussed in a class I took this summer called Critical Thinking. And in that class, it was an English class, so we were sort of analyzing it from the perspective of the book Brave New World and the book 1984 by Orwell. And In Brave New World, I haven't read the book, but from the summary and synopsis that I received in that class, haven't read the book yet, I should say, and we'll talk about the word yet. We live in a society that is deadened by overstimulation.
Oh, that's right.
We have all of these like inputs, right? Even something as simple as the colors that we're exposed to on a daily basis, especially online as you're scrolling.
You even like dive a second into psychology, it's like crazy how much time.
Oh yeah. That we have to be careful to not be deadened by overstimulation or paralyzed by all of the options that you have. There was paralysis paralysis. Yeah. When you're looking at all of these things, like you don't even know where to go or where to start. So I think AI that's a really good application of it, is sort of like breaking it down like cog layer. All
Shout
of
out
these
cog layer.
gotta put that plug in there, right? To take these extremely large topics and bring them down to the personal level, where it can ask you like refining questions to actually understand what is it that you want to learn and help you through that thought process.
Very cool, yeah. And I just want to go back to something I think we overlooked a little bit when you were talking about education and relationships. I really want to touch on building relationships, because that's something that's also an education itself, right? How you interact with different personalities, how you interact with different types of people is an education in itself. So from your experiences, going to Stanford, talking to these highly educated people like the doctors and the professors and the lecturers, what type of qualities do you find in a good communicator or a good relationship builder, I could say?
I have to give a lot of credit to a man called Vin Jiang, or Jiang, I think that's how you pronounce it. He's an Australian communications expert. I call him an expert. I think he calls himself a keynote speaker, and that's just sort of his way of marketing himself. But Vin has taught me a few things about communication that I think are really valuable. One of which is something as simple as your volume. When you're passionate about something, it's okay to get loud, because the importance that you're giving to something is reflected in the amount of volume that you say that with. And sometimes going low can also be really valuable in making a point. So that's one thing. But your specific question is related to relationships. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, I mean, when, for example, you went into Stanford, right? Assuming you didn't know anyone there, right? You got in your circle of friends and you started developing these connections. You mentioned someone from Brazil. You mentioned all these people that you met, the professors, being able to speak to them. What type of qualities does that person have that is able to go up and talk to someone and be confident? If you could mention that.
Okay. I think when it comes to Stanford specifically, a lot of it has to do with breaking down the imaginary walls that we make in our brain. At the end of there's this lovely quote. It's not an exact quote, but I read this book called The Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Nelson Mandela's right-hand man. So these two spiritual leaders are talking all about how do we become happier, but not just happiness short term, but like joy, like a sustained sort of state of being. And one of the things that they talk about is getting rid of formality. So there's a story that the Dalai Lama tells that he was visiting a U.S. president, and the president's chair broke, and like he sort of like fell, and everyone just started laughing. And as soon as that chair was broken, the ice was broken. And now he wishes that every time he meets someone who has a lot of authority or a lot of power, a fancy title, that a chair breaks. Yeah. So that people can just laugh about it and move on to looking at each other as humans. Humans who are perfectly imperfect. That's really valuable in recognizing that at the end of the day, no matter who you're talking to, no matter how many abbreviations they might have after their name, they're just a person. And I find a lot of value in treating everyone I meet like a potential teacher. There's something that you can teach me that I would not have known had you not taught me that.
And there's probably some value you can give them too, like even though you might not realize
Exactly.
at the beginning, like
Exactly.
it's a mutual way.
And this goes back to the pedestal thing, where if you put this person on a pedestal, you can't approach them because you feel like you're less than. But if you think of yourself as an equal in humanity at the end of the day, you can have meaningful conversation. So I'll tell you another story. When I was invited to Camp Royal, which is sponsored by Interact, which is a Rotary-sponsored organization, I made it my goal to speak to every single person there. There were 73 campers, students like myself, who were going into their senior year of high school, and there were maybe like 12 guest speakers. And at the beginning of the camp, like literally as I was coming off of that bus, I made this like conscious decision that by the end of these 6 days in this retreat in Northern California in the mountains, the Trinity Shasta Range, I wanted to have a conversation with every single one of these people. How did I do it? I just talked to people. I mean, it's not really that hard, right? I mean, I did
science behind talking to
yeah.
people.
Well, there is a science behind
That's
talking to people, but you don't necessarily need to know the science because you figure it out as you go along. Okay, this works, this doesn't work. So I had this sample size of almost like 100 people who I could just go up and say, yo, what's up, how's it going? It doesn't need to be like a formal introduction. It does not need to be anything fancy, but there's a lot of value in talking to people. And at Stanford, actually, I was at this bus stop, and there was some researcher next to me. I don't know who this guy was, right? We were right by SLAC, which is like a government energy lab at Stanford. And he was wearing like some cool, I don't know, uniform type thing. And I just thought he was like an interesting person. I didn't even know he was an interesting person, but he was a human nonetheless. And I asked him, why do people not talk to each other? Because we had been standing there for a solid 3 to 4 minutes waiting for the bus to come, and we were just sitting in silence by ourselves, or like pretending to like checking the weather apps on our phone to not talk to each other.
Yeah.
Or even now with the availability of social media, just scrolling through my Instagram. So I just literally asked him, why do people not talk to each other? And he was like, that's an interesting question. Because people want to talk to you. We live in a society where, not everywhere, but at least in America, and at least in urban and suburban environments, where we live pretty close to each other, yet we're so far. We are physically close to each other, yet I have no idea what's going on in my neighbor's house or the person that I meet at the street or at the bus stop. And we had this like deep conversation in the 3 minutes before the bus got there, and he goes, I think you're really brave for asking that question. And I was like, dude, if you think I'm brave for just talking to someone at the bus stop, that's an insult to people who have done actually brave things.
It's really interesting. 'Cause
Yeah. And one of the reasons that he suggested that people might not want to talk to each other is that they're afraid of annoying other people. Like, he's at the bus stop doing his thing. I don't want to annoy him by talking to him. And I was like, and I literally asked him, am I annoying you right now if we're having this conversation? He's like, no, not at all. So I don't know. We sort of create these fictitious scenarios in our heads that really have no real translation into life. But talk to people. It doesn't need to be perfectly planned or have perfect eye contact, but the more interactions that you make, the better you'll get at it. And I'm still a work in progress as well. I just came back, that's why I'm dressed so formally, from a conference, and I didn't speak to everyone there, but I could have, right? And having that ability to just say, why don't I try to get out of my comfort zone and speak to everyone there. Speaking of getting out of my comfort zone, I want you two to do something with me. Okay, so cross your arms. Okay, and everyone watching, do this with me too. Which arm is in front?
Left. For me.
Your right arm is in front, your left arm is in front?
Yeah. I'm crossing it probably, but yeah.
Okay,
It works.
so now try switching it.
Yeah.
Okay, how does that feel?
It's all right.
It's all right. It's kind of
Yeah,
weird,
a little
kind of
bit.
uncomfortable.
Yeah,
It's like, okay, I haven't done
it's
this
not usual,
before.
yeah.
It's not usual. Okay, now go back.
Hmm?
Feels comfortable.
Yeah.
Feels nice. Feels easy. Go back again. Okay, we're gonna do this
A
like a
little
few more
easier.
times. A few more times. Okay.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
now
It's working.
you want to be at the opposite position to normal.
Yeah.
How does that feel now?
Way normal. Way more normal.
Definitely.
No,
It feels a little bit less uncomfortable, a little bit more natural. Now imagine if you kept on doing this, and I literally did this. One of the things that we learned at Camp Royal, I was just doing this for like 6 days. It becomes a lot less uncomfortable. So you just have to do these things repeatedly. Have many interactions and many conversations that'll build your subconscious confidence to just talk to people. An interesting point about confidence. I think this is from Alex Hormozy, where he says, have you heard this?
Go ahead.
Confidence is, you are only warranted, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, you're only warranted to have confidence once you have an undeniable stack of proof, which is substantiating what you say and how you are. So number one is build that proof. Build those interactions. Write those papers. Take those classes. Learn that material. And then you'll be confident doing it.
That's amazing.
I love
So
that.
many points there.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Wow, yeah. I mean, you know how you're talking about like just talk to people. Like we create all these imaginary stakes in our mind. I was actually just listening to a podcast earlier where they were discussing a book. It's called The Creative Act, A Way of Being. I've started reading it. It's really good. I've heard it's like the #1 book for anyone who's doing anything creative related. One of the quotes that they were discussing in this podcast from there is like, a lot of times we create these stakes. So just lower the stakes and everything will be so much better. Like whether it's business, whether it's something creative, whether it's something like building something or something as simple as talking to people, we create these stakes in our mind that don't exist.
Right. This is a lovely point that you mentioned. One of the things that we did at Stanford is simulate emergency situations, right? So like some guy's on a plane and he has like a hypoglycemic emergency, low blood sugar, he just falls to the ground. And Stanford actually has a really cool simulating facility. It's like in the basement of that same Li Ka-shing building, and it's what's called a high fidelity simulation. So this methodology was developed by Dr. David Gaba, and the whole point of it is to have the simulation be as realistic as possible. So when you're in those high stakes situations where someone is actually dying, right? We also had one in the OR where a patient was having like a tachycardia, a weird, heart rhythm. And when you're in those situations where there's actual stakes and lives are actually needing to be saved, everything else just sort of is not that deep anymore. So when you do things that are actually difficult, or when you are put in situations that have real stakes, everything else is not really as high stakes anymore. So you're absolutely right. We create these fake scenarios and these fake outcomes, but no one's gonna die.
Like we even with this podcast, we're like, okay, we're gonna have like one angle is like tilted. We're like, oh my god, the whole world's gonna see. They're gonna comment about it. Realistically, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Right.
So many examples like that. I mean, in anything, there's so many stakes that can be created, but
I love that. Yeah, I love that how you mentioned that. Like at the end of the day, no one really cares as long as the value is there, right?
exactly.
Yeah, and it comes down to having the value. And
Even like, yeah, go ahead.
good, yeah. As like you offer, like you said, we've been talking a lot about what you've been saying has a lot of value. It's gonna mean a lot to people what you said, right? relationships. We touched on a lot of different things. And I really want to touch on a point we haven't mentioned yet about your community service, right? So some of the things you've done with the Interact and
ABSA network.
So Interact stands for International Action, and it is the youth branch, so ages 12 through 18 from Rotary International. Rotary is one of the largest, I think it might be the largest service organizations on the planet. Their reach expands over 100 countries, if I'm not mistaken, and they have service clubs in cities all over the world, and their motto is service above self. So service is broadly and widely defined, right? But I've personally gotten involved with Interact through my school. So when I was in high school, our school had an Interact club, and I'm not gonna lie, the very beginning of it, I was like, hey, let me see what this thing is about. It might help me for college apps. Also, my sister told me about Interact, so she was like, hey, you check out this club. It's a good opportunity for volunteering. And I started off as a member, and I was like, okay, let me attend some of these events. And these events were making real impact for real human beings. I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is something that I want to be a bigger part of. Especially with Interact, the international connections. It's like a global network, literally. There was this guy in Morocco who DM'd our Interact club. This is a few years after, once I'd sort of become more involved. I was on the board of Interact. I was what we call a board intern. So because my school's Interact club was so large, we had like 300 members. The board itself was like 12 people, and they had like 2 interns. So as a board intern, I was sort of tasked with shadowing the different positions and seeing which one I liked best, so that in the future I could sort of align myself with that specific position on the board. So as an intern, I was probably shadowing the publicist at the time. We got a DM on our Instagram from this guy in Morocco. His name is Ismail. So Ismail is like, hey, you guys, we are doing this service project where we are bringing essentials to a village called Douar Ougoug. It's like 70 miles from Marrakesh. So, and I know you're Moroccan, so I can see a little smile, half Moroccan here. So we're gonna provide like tea and blankets and sugar and flour, bread, all of these basic necessities, rice, oil. And are you guys in or are you guys not in? So I was like, okay, we got this DM. I'm just a board intern. What do I do with this? And I bring it up at our next board meeting. I'm like, hey, we got this DM from this guy. Do you guys want to maybe consider this as a potential international service project? And at that time, I think we were organizing something else, which was sort of top of mind. So the president says, Raza, I want you to lead the charge for this. We're going to create an international action committee, and I want you to lead this Morocco project. Because if we're going to do it, you need to be responsible for it. It's like, okay. I think since then, my self-perception has probably changed a little bit, because I was like, okay, I've never done anything like this before, and I don't know how this is all going to work, because he's like thousands of miles away. So I was like, I think it's like 7,000 miles. So I had no idea, where to even start. And when you don't know something, a growth mindset is really important to have.
Growth mindset.
Yeah. So this is tying it into when I mentioned the word yet. I had a full assignment on this word, essentially, in an English class I took at Las Positas, where we were examining the power of the word yet. Okay, let me frame a situation for you two. There's 2 people who are equally educated, right? and they're exposed to something that is completely novel to them. Neither of them have like a lick of information or knowledge about this specific topic. And this is much better if I have something to draw it out, but that's okay. I'll try to explain it verbally. So both of them have like this question mark above their head, and they both say, I don't know. But one of them says, I don't know yet. And the addition of that one word, I don't know yet, allows him to say, but I'll find out. So the guy who says, I don't know, sort of ignores it and is like, I don't know. Yeah. The one who says, I don't know yet, and takes the initiative to learn it, to go through that education process in 1 week or in 6 months or in 10 years will say, I now know this thing. And the other person will say, I don't know. Yeah. All with that one modifier, I don't know yet. So, bringing this back to Morocco, I had a lot of Zoom meetings with Ismail and his team who were on the ground in Morocco. I was actually going to go myself, and then COVID happened, and it was like a full logistical nightmare. I think the Kingdom of Morocco like closed their borders in and out, and it was like a really big deal. So that plan sort of took another turn, which is that we're going to help remotely, and we're going to provide funds. So taking this innovative approach, we were like, okay, how do we collect money? We're just a bunch of high schoolers. We don't have access to the fundraising capabilities that you might expect of a larger organization or a more well-established organization. Although Interact is very well-established, and we could have gone to Rotary and asked for money, or we could have done a more traditional like fundraising event, but we thought to do something a little bit more creative. So my team and I sat down and were like, okay, how are we going to raise money? And the answer was donuts. Wow. So we sold dozens of Krispy Kreme donuts, and Krispy Kreme has like a fundraising match process, right? And that's how we raised our money to go to help out in Morocco. And we ended up raising over $2,000 to send there. And that money, combined with the money that they raised on the Moroccan from our counterparts there, we were able to support over 70 families in Douaragoug for the entire winter. And the interesting thing about Douaragoug is that usually when you think of Morocco or that area at large, we don't think of it to be very cold. But in the mountainous regions, it gets extremely cold in the winter, to the point that people were literally freezing to death in that village. So our contributions, and I would have to thank all of our club members who contributed to that, literally saved lives, because we were able to get blankets and food and oil and tea and rice and all of these basic necessities, along with school supplies for the younger students who were in the village. So that was a really impactful part of my service with Interact at the school level. Now that I'm done with high school, I'm working on the district level. So that is all of Northern California, basically from the Oregon border all the way down to San Ramon. So this year I'm serving as our service coordinator, and inshallah that'll be a good experience as well, and we can make some impact. But at the end of the day, it's all about impact. That's really important.
Beautiful. Well said, man. I want to kind of wrap up here a little bit. Going back to a little bit about your childhood, was there any strong piece of advice that you received that shaped the person that you are today?
Yeah, actually, there was. I was talking to my dad's aunt. She's a physician, and I was just asking her for general life advice. There was this thing I read, like, it's probably sent in some WhatsApp family group chat, right? Like, ask your elders for advice, because not everything is found on Google. And I was asking her, I literally just said, do you have any advice for me? And she says, hold on to your religion. And I found that was really interesting. I'm like, hey, I'm trying to, become a doctor and do all of these things. What does that have to do with anything? And she said, your deen, your religion, is going to keep you sane, really. For me, it's like a rope that you can cling on to, right? When life goes sideways or that project doesn't turn out exactly how you want it to be, when you can return to that universal constant of your religion, that is really important, and that's been really important for me. And now when I see ABSA Network, for example, and we have these college students, these university students all across the United States and Canada and the UK with ABSOC, who are clinging on to their religion while they're doing amazing things in the academic front, in the research front, in their social fronts. It's so important for me personally to have that as a guide throughout this whole process, because you can't do it alone.
Definitely, yeah. So many projects, so many great points that you brought up today. So before we wrap up, we'll do 3 minutes of rapid fire, I think. And then one thing before we get to the rapid fire, what is your vision for the next 5 years? What do you hope to accomplish? And how would people keep up with you?
And where do you see yourself?
I hope to see myself as someone who thinks stupidly big. Yeah. And when you're able to think stupidly big and not necessarily act stupidly big, I think there's a distinction that needs to be made. But by thinking stupidly big in 5 years, I don't know where I'm going to be, to be honest. I don't even know what tomorrow holds. Yeah. Opportunities sort of just arise.
Amazing. And how would people keep up with you? Best way to reach out to you? Let's say someone's interested in the paths that you've taken, the journeys and different projects you're involved with. What's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I actually haven't thought about this. Well, my LinkedIn. Yeah, Raza Ali on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way for this target market. Obviously, there's a different facet for others.
But if you're interested in food content,
yes. Oh, we didn't get a chance to talk too much about that, right? Yeah. Raza's food. If you're interested in following what restaurants I'm eating at, that is another passion of mine, the food content creation. Got to plug at Raza's Food. And I also have to plug HFCC, Halal Food Content Creators. We're a coalition of now about 12 different content creators. I don't like the word influencer. So people who are creating videos and photos and other forms of food content in the Bay Area and the halal scene specifically. We've come together to form this coalition, this collective. Abbas Muhammad is a part of it. Shahzad Shafi is a part of it. Harun Abbasi is a part of it, and myself. We sort of form the founding members, and we have a bunch of other people. I'm so happy to have everyone on our team for that.
It's amazing. We'll make sure to link all of those.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So yeah, let's
ready for that rapid fire?
Let's do it. Let's bring it on.
All right.
What's one skill you believe everyone should have?
One skill I believe everyone should have: communication, because that's just so transferable to everything. If you can talk to people, you're going to be set.
Cool. Walk us through your morning routine.
My morning routine varies heavily depending on the day. Okay. Today I was up at like 6:30 and on the road just to get to these early morning conferences. But usually I wake up. Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. And I see the sun. Seeing the sun is a really important part
That's
of
really
my
important, yeah.
not staring at the sun. I don't want to burn my retina. Yeah. But going outside.
Definitely. That's amazing. If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, it depends how young, but if I could go back to like my middle school self, I would say it's not that deep. You know, whether it be those.
I love that.
It's not that deep.
It's not that deep.
Especially in middle school.
Especially in middle school, especially with the grades and everything. It's not that deep. You know, just be a good person.
Cool. How do you usually relieve stress?
How do I usually relieve stress? I've been lifting for the past 2 years, so that's been a good outlet. And it's also a good way to tie in my anatomy and physiology knowledge into a real life application. And going outside. Yeah.
Nice.
That's
go look at the sun.
Who's your current role model?
My current role model. I gotta get a little religious here, man. I was reading one of an analysis of Imam Ali's life, which is written by a Christian scholar, George Jordak, and the book is called As-Sawt al-Adalat al-Insaniyya, The Voice of Human Justice. So I was reading that book and I was seeing how Imam Ali lived his day-to-day life, and that I would say is my aspirational role model.
Cool. If you could have any superpower, what would you choose? You got 30 seconds.
30 seconds on the clock.
I'm not sure. Probably super speed.
Super speed, nice.
Can you recommend any must-read books or your favorite book?
Okay, I have a really long reading list. I've been trying to get through them. So I can't say just one. Not yet.
That's fine.
How would you describe your mood in one word?
Right now,
You got 5
I
seconds.
feel energized.
What's your dream job?
A physician, a doctor.
0 seconds.
That's
There
it.
we go.
That was
Perfect
beautiful.
timing.
That was beautiful.
That's awesome. So yeah,
Awesome, man.
let's end this.
Perfect.
Okay. So thank you so much for joining us. If there was one key point that a listener would take away today, what would it be?
Can I say two?
Go ahead.
Say it too. That's
Okay.
Go
fine.
ahead.
All right. Number one is going to be think stupidly big. And number two is remember the power of yet.